No, he said it was fluxing. Flux capacitor is fluxing. Okay. This week we pick up with vaYiqra, chapter 22, verse 4. That's that every man who draws near from any of your offspring, and we're speaking to the priest here, to the holy food, and this is the food that is set aside for the priest, it's pure, you say it either way, these souls shall cut their selves or themselves, I'm not even sure which themselves, yeah, off from my presence, I am Yahweh. So, and as I pointed out last week, normally the Hebrew word vaYiqra, which literally means to go from one spot to the other, to draw in or flow with holiness, not he devoured, to that he clean, and that touched in all unclean soul or man that shall go out from. If you say it twice, it's an explanation point, or it's idiomatic in this case. And so it's going to be another man. If you say they're placed together, now there's no L in between these two words, so it's not one another. Okay, so we have me sowing, i.e., winter, also a planting. It's seed, that which is scattered, So it can be of actual seed, it can be of the planting of seed. And when you say seed, that well, then now you're talking about the children of Aaron. You follow? Of course, that's the next word. So it's the children of Aaron, and it's Aharon, but there might have been confusion in that. Okay, is this literally the children that directly descend from Aharon? If it said B'nai, so the word for seed is used instead because Aharon was the high priest. So anyone who becomes Cohen, who becomes a priest, that's definitely the seed of Aharon, right? So it's more clarifying to the Jewish mind for the direct descendants of Aaron, and the other Kohanim wouldn't have to follow it. Anyway, so it's just something that clarifies. And then that's followed by uh, Zarua, which is stricken. It's to be in. Uh, the next thing that the dictionary says is prostration, which is to be flat on the ground, or flat on a bed. Well, it's because you're stricken with an illness and now you're bedridden, so you're prostrated. That's where that idea comes from. So you would never use prostration in your translation here. That's not what's being said here. Then we have O in Hebrew, which means or in English. Zav, that's of a flow. So let's say you're a teenager and you have acne and some of that stuff. I know that's gross, but when they say flow, they're talking about something along those lines. You have a runny nose. Your tears won't stop flowing. You have a sore that just keeps oozing. That's mostly what this is talking about. But all of those other things are going to fall within this same category. And then it says Ba Korashim. So it's with all things holy. So it's said in the plural here instead of the singular. Then it says lo. And remember, we say things backwards. So we would have started this with not or no, and in Hebrew they end it with the not or the no. So if you're stricken with this flowing sore, if you will, that makes you unclean. And then it says, lo yochal. You're not allowed to eat this food. Because remember, we're talking about the food that is for the priests. The subject has not changed. And so without going on and seeing what the next words are, we already know that this person, they just cannot eat this particular food for this particular sacrifice. Because as we've already seen, there are other sacrifices from which they can eat. They just cannot eat from this particular sacrifice. All right. So then it says odd, which we would write T-O. It's kind of like the word L in this context, from here to there. But generally speaking, odd is used more of time. And we would usually say until. So we'll have to see how it plays out. I'm not actually sure at this point. Then it says veha nogea, which is and that touched. So first is the person who had this flow, and now it's starting to seem that it's saying, and anyone who's touched that ickiness. Then it says bechol tamei, and to any uncleanness. So it's not just the oozy stuff, but anything unclean. Then they use the word nefesh, which means soul. We think of it as the soul, the part of us that lives on after we're gone. But it's also, you can translate it as person or people, because it's the way it's used. How many souls were on board that ship? How many souls were lost at sea? We still use it in that way. Maybe not so much nowadays, but some of us sitting in this room are old enough to remember when that's the way they used to talk here in America. Then it's O, which means or. Ish, we're back to saying man again. Asher tetze, which is to go out. It says mimenu, so that goes out from among us. Sichvat zara, to lay seed. So that sounds like to go plant. So let's see what we have. Let's put this all together. Any man, ish, man, any man from the descendant of Aaron, any man from the descendants of Aharon, and then I have in my little boxes the Kohanim, because that can be very confusing, again, when it's talking about descendants of Aharon directly from his lineage. No, we are talking about the Kohanim, the priests. We're talking about the food that they eat. So everything in this chapter is about the priests. So when it says the descendants of Aaron, Aharon, it's talking about the Kohanim. You can't lose sight of that. That's why you can't just take a sentence out of the Bible and make it stand on its own. That's impossible in Hebrew. Is purified. And any soul who is stricken with any impurity, remember that where it said anything, it wasn't just the sores and all that, with any impurity, or a man among us who has an effusion of semen. I kind of went past that as quick as I could, just those last couple of words. Comma. See, again, in English, we have this as verse 4, and it's not even a whole sentence. It's only part of a sentence. So we're going to have to read the next sentence to have any idea what this sentence means, because it stops mid-thought. Okay. So now I've already pointed out that man is used idiomatically to mean any man. Just always keep that in mind, because it's almost always going to be the case. Then we have the words until he is purified. Onkelos by Drauzine and Wagner rightly pointed out that ad asher yi tehar, not with the ch, to that he clean, literally, and refer to progressive stages in the purification process. They also, of the word nefesh, wrongly argued that it should be self-evident that nefesh is here used of a dead person. They were way off on this one. However, verses 3 through 7 are actually one single verse in ancient Hebrew. This is why they missed it. Even if it weren't, which it is, verse 6 says that the person is unclean until the evening. This would be in direct violation of the law concerning the touching of a dead person, would it not? Yes, it would. That means that Drauzine and Wagner were wrong. So don't, and this is only, I think, the first time I've actually had to disagree with these guys. This is a very good work. Onkelos by Drauzine and Wagner. A very good work. You can pretty much depend on what they say is right, but this time they're wrong. And they're going to be wrong in this chapter. But again, if you're taking things out of context, if you're doing things one verse at a time, this sort of thing can happen to you. It can happen to me. It can happen to anybody. So let's try to keep every part of the verse together, even if it's broken up into 10 different verses. If it's a single verse in Hebrew, we should look at it as a single verse in Hebrew. It'll help us not to make so many mistakes. All right, let's go on with verse 5. I don't know what's going on with my voice. I thought I was great, but I I forgot to bring something to drink. Do we have any water in here, Donna? Okay. What? Okay. Oh, well.
I have tea. You want to finish that off?
No, I'll just see what I can do. Okay, so where am I? Verse 5. Very literally in English, or man that touch in all creature that he unclean to he, or any mankind that he unclean to he, to all uncleanness. This one's not as confusing as the last with the Hebrew word o, which er yiga, that is touched. This is where a lot of Jews get mixed up. We think that if we have touched a dead person and we go and touch another person, that other person is now been made unclean by us. The Bible clearly shows us that's not true. Think about this story. The Pesach has just begun. There are some Jewish men who have encountered a dead body. So they go to Moshe and they ask him, what do we do? And so Moshe said, I'm not sure. Let me go ask God. So he goes into the tabernacle. He has a conversation with God. He comes out of the tabernacle and tells them, you must celebrate the Pesach. Okay, first off, you can say, well, Moshe didn't let him touch him. Based on what? You don't know that. And now they've just been told you have to come into the camp if they weren't already there, because I don't think there's any evidence that Moshe came outside the camp to talk to them. So they probably were in the camp talking to him in the first place. Then they have to make the sacrifice and eat the Pesach, which means they are going to touch the Kohanim, and yet God said, you will make that sacrifice. So their uncleanness did not pass to the other people for which they came in contact. And they would most definitely have come into contact with other people. So the idea that our uncleanness can pass to another person. It's a very gray area because there are times when it can. If you touch a dead body and you've got, it's a fresh person just died from a terrible car accident, and you were holding them when they died, and then you touch somebody else with that liquidy blood on you, you have both of you are unclean. But this was a case where these men had obviously showered, or they wouldn't be where they were. They wouldn't have been talking to Moshe in the first place, because that was one of the, well, I say shower. They had immersed themselves and purified themselves before they got there, but they were unclean for a whole week at this point, not unclean just until evening because it was a dead body. Yet because they had cleaned themselves, that uncleanness did not pass on. And we need to know this. Okay, so now it's saying that man has touched anything unclean, but it's saying sheretz. Well, now that's talking about creatures, the creepy things, the things that crawl and slither on the ground and that sort of thing. Asher yitma, that is unclean, any of the creepy things that are unclean, because not every creepy thing is unclean. A grasshopper creeps, but it's not unclean, right? So it's being specific here. And then it says lo, so that's a sound-alike word. That sounds like the not word. That's not the not word. This is just a lamed followed by a vav, and so that's to it. He's been made unclean by it. Let's just say it that way in English. This is O ve'adam. Now we've gone from Ish to Adam, and Adam does not mean man. It never has. I don't care how many English Bibles translate it as man. It doesn't mean man as in this man or that man. It means man as in mankind. We Jews really have got to learn this. Anyway, so it says, or mankind asher yitma, that has become unclean, that is currently unclean. Anyone among mankind that, he's got a festering sore oozing out, now you've touched that. Now it's just anyone among mankind. So you got the creepy thing, you got the mankind. Then it says lo, which again is not the negative. It's he's been touched by it. Then it says lechol tumat. So, and that's any kind of uncleanness. And again, if someone's become unclean and they've showered or immersed themselves or whatever we want to call that, I mean, biblically speaking, and this time it would have been an immersion, would have basically been a bath. Well, unless they stood under a waterfall, then they could have had a shower. In the time of the second temple, they actually had showers, water flowing down like a shower inside the temple. You can go to Israel and look at them right now. Not that there's any water flowing out of them, but they are there. If you go, on the tour underneath, did you get to do that where you got to see the synagogue that was underneath the ground and all that? Did you get to see any of that? Because I don't know if it was open when you were there.
No, it wasn't. They just opened it recently.
Yeah. See, you missed out on that. The showers, you would have seen the showers had you been there.
We've seen the showers where they had where they baptized at.
Yeah, they're right by the baptismals. Yeah. So they definitely had those in the second temple period, but there's no evidence that would have existed. Certainly not in this time period, unless, there was a waterfall. So anyway, I'm saying shower, but hopefully you understand. I'm just saying they have washed their bodies. They have purified themselves. That does not pass to you. This is something different. This is you have come into contact with something that definitely makes you impure. So, picking back up with the previous verse, in fact, let me back up. There'll be a little bit of a pause here. So it says, any man from the descendants of Aaron, so any Cohen who has an infection or open sore shall not eat the holy food until he is purified. And any soul who is stricken with any impurity, or any person or man among us who has an effusion of semen, and or a man who is struck by any creature that is unclean to him, or by persons who are unclean to him, with anything unclean, comma, that kind of a long sentence, right? Because in Hebrew, your sentence went until the whole thought was completed. Well, in English, that would be what we call a run-on sentence. And when you're taking them from the Hebrew Bible, those are very long, very, very long run-on sentences. That they can be an entire chapter, can be a single verse in Hebrew. Then there's nothing wrong with that, because that's part of the rules of Hebrew. But what they did when they translated into English was break it up so that they wouldn't be run-on sentences. And now people are breaking these things up as if there's something separate. Anyway, Rashi, based on Sifra, argued that a creature as small as a lintel, or the touching of a piece of a dead corpse as small as an olive, would make one unclean. He is not exactly wrong, but what if the creature is smaller than a lintel, or the piece of a dead corpse is smaller than an olive? In other words, he's not wrong, but it's nonsensical. Any part of a dead body, no matter how large the piece is or small, makes it unclean. Any, unclean, creepy thing, no matter how small or big it is, does the same thing. So to try to put a size on it is a very wrong approach. Okay, going on to verse 6. Very literal English. Soul that touch in he, or in it, remember he is it. In Hebrew, to say it, as it were, it's a gender. How do I say that? How do you say a language is based on gender? Someone help me out here. Okay, that's good. Hebrew is a gender-specific language. Not always. Look what I just found. I forgot that I had done that. But now I'm going to choke because I swallowed wrong. Sorry. It's most of the time gender-specific. So to say it in Hebrew, you would have to say essentially he. That's the masculine. And essentially she would be the feminine. So when I'm reading this and I say soul that touch in he, you can think of it as soul that touch in it, because it's just the masculine of it. But you can only use that as a rule of thumb, because every once in a while they are talking about a he. Is what it is. Okay, so I'm trying to see which one. Yeah, so they have bow, not come or go, but the bait followed by a vav. So in it, or with he. It can be either one. You just have to look at the way the sentence is put together to know whether you're saying it or whether you're saying he, speaking of a person, right? So we'll figure that out as we go. So it starts off with nefesh, or continues on. I shouldn't say starts off. This is a continuation. We're still on the same verse.
You didn't read it yet.
I didn't read it.
No.
Oh, so that touch in he or in it, and unclean to the evening, and not he devour from the holies, for if washed flesh he in waters, which is, of course, very important. So we pick back up on the same verse with the word nefesh, so a person. Because we're not getting deep here and talking about that part of you that lives on, the spirit, the anima, the person. Asher tiga, that should ring a bell. We've just had this already. That's to touch. You've reached out and you've touched something, or something has essentially reached out and touched you, like you got bit by a mosquito or something. Because that will make you unclean, will it not? The mosquito just bit you and you slapped it. Now you got blood all over you. Or you just became unclean, you filthy sinner. That's why in the New Testament, Shaul said, not all sin leads to death. Because that's sin. You're in violation of God's law, because God's law says, God said, I am pure, therefore you must be pure. So in that moment, and that happened to me a few days ago, I slapped that thing and blood went everywhere. He was filling up, buddy. And I almost never get bit by a mosquito. So that was an odd thing to happen for me. Yeah, Donna just said I wasn't around. Yes, she'd been around. She would have been drained of her blood instead of me. But I became impure. I became unholy in that moment. Now, am I going to hell for that? Well, of course not. What if I don't have have the bath and the evening hasn't come and I drop dead from a heart attack, a second or two later, I'm going to hell. No, not all sin, and that is a sin, leads to death. Because what is sin? Best explanation ever given came from Yochanan ben Zakkai. A lot of Jews know who that is. That's the guy who gave us Jews the Mishnah, the oral law. But he's also one of the men who wrote at least one, maybe all, of the letters of the New Testament that are attributed to the name Yochanan. Same guy. That's my theory, and I'm standing by it because I believe I'm right. And I think I could argue it, although a smarter guy might argue me down. I don't know. I'll leave that out there. So what we're doing. So a person who has been touched by in some way, then it says this is the bow, or really in biblical Hebrew, it would have been be'o. They would not have said bow. They would have said be'o. But these days, we would just say bow. So he was touched by it. Whether he touched it or it touched him doesn't make any difference. So then it says, ve'tamah. Tama, unclean. He's been touched by uncleanness. And then it says ad, and that's that word where it can be to, or it more often than not until. And it's almost always of time. So, until is a really good rule of thumb. And you got to remember with Hebrew, everything's a rule of thumb. There's very few hard and fast rules in Hebrew. Okay, then we have ha-arev. It really doesn't sound. You've heard people say Boker Tov, and they say Erev Tov. That's Erev, until the evening. Ad ha-erev, until the evening. Then it says lo, or no, it doesn't. It says, yes, it does. Then it says velo yochal. He will not eat. Darn. You have to fast from the moment you got bit by that mosquito at 3 p.m. until the sun goes down. Oh, horror. Although if you get up at 4 in the morning and get bit, and now you have to wait until the sun goes down. Oh, I don't know if I could survive it. Anyway, you can't eat. Then it says min ha kodashim, so you can't eat from this holy food, right? It says ki im rachatz, and that's literally for if washed, and that's depending. You can only eat, and the idea that you can eat after the sun goes down is now dependent upon you taking a bath or a shower or whatever. You got to wash your body. Then it says, well, basaro, your body, your flesh. Ba yamin, in water. Of course, that's in Hebrew, it's plural, waters. So that, for a Jew, that indicates that it cannot be a bathtub. It essentially has to be a shower. So if you're in a place where there's no shower, what do? You take a bath in a river, right? And nowadays we don't have that problem. We just take a shower. It has to be moving water. That's why it's believed that that's why it's said in plural. Because if water is just in, say, a bathtub, that is not moving water. And if it's left there long enough, it goes bad, where moving water is constantly filtering itself and it's good and all that kind of stuff. I totally agree with that. I'm not disagreeing with that concept in any way. So our translation, that soul that is struck is unclean in him until the evening, and he will not eat from the holy food unless he washes his flesh in water. So there's a condition on this being able to eat. But this is not the end of the sentence. That ends with the comma as well. All right, so at verse 7, very literally it says, and come the sun and clean, and after he devour from the holies for bread he. Okay, so you have uva, so that's bow. We make the B, the bait sound, with a B sound, B like boy, but we also make it with a V sound, V like victory. Right? So sometimes we say bow, sometimes we say vo. It just depends on how a sentence is structured. It depends on how a word is put together. Nobody's absolutely sure of what those rules are. All we know is that a group called the Masoretes put this together 1,000 years ago and put all the little dots and dashes on the Hebrew text, and that tells us whether to pronounce it as a V or a B. You find that people who speak Hebrew will almost always use the B like boy sound, but I'm using the V sound because I line everything up with the Masoretic text, since that's what we're reading. Okay, so to come, that's to leave this place and go to that place. And we're talking, we would think of that as go, but you cannot come somewhere unless you have gone somewhere. You have to go to come. And if you have come to some place, it's because you went from someplace, right? And so in Hebrew, bo is both to leave and to return. It's to go on a journey and to complete a journey. It's both. It's not one or the other. It's actually both. That's biblical Hebrew, right? So we have bo, and then that's followed up with ha shemesh. Because think about it, the sun does not, you could say it goes down, right? But as it's going down, it's actually coming up somewhere else, right? And as it's coming up somewhere else, it's going down wherever it came from. because that never, we circle the sun here on our little planet. And so it's not actually going anywhere we are, but it appears to us like it's coming and going. There's just one word for that in Hebrew. Okay, so we're talking about the rising of the sun in this case, because remember, we just said you're unclean until the sun goes down. Now we're talking about what happens when that sun comes back up. Vetaher, which is to be clean, tahar. It's to shine, to be bright. You took a bath and you're all shiny and bright now. That's where that idea comes from. But you take a nice new car and it's gotten all muddy and you wash it all up and it looks nice and shiny and bright. There's the idea. But we're calling that clean. It's also used to purity. Once you're in right standing with God, you're all shiny and bright and in the light of God, and I don't know, all that kind of stuff. So then it says ve'achar yohar. So the ahar is after. So after the sun has come up and you're bright and shiny clean because you took your bath in the living water or you took a shower, which is much easier to do. After all of that, yochal, rather, I'm looking at two different things and getting them confused. He can eat. You can eat after that. Min ha kodashim. You can eat from the foods that have been set aside for the Kohanim. Ki lachmohu. Because lachmo, that's from lechem, bread. And then it says who at the end? Because it's his bread. He can eat that bread once he has taken his bath and the sun has gone down. Now the sun has come back up. Now he's pure and he's clean. And why can he eat it? Because he's been purified? No, he can eat it because he's purified and because it belongs to him in the first place. It's his bread. It was set aside for him in the first place. So our translation of this part, and after the sun rises and he is clean, if he is clean and he is clean, so I'm not saying if, because it's got to be the two together. So after the sun rises and he is clean, he will eat from the holy food because it is his bread. As one would expect, some sages argued. You ready for me to go over here? Some sages argued when the bath had to take place. Even Ezra seems to make the claim that the text actually says the washing must take place during the day, but it does not say any such thing. Saadia argued that he is clean the moment the sun sets, as the text does say. However, some sages argued that the man does not become clean until he is bathed and the stars are in the sky. Whatever. All I know is he better take a bath by morning if he wants breakfast. If the Kohen is not pure and thus able to eat until the sunrise, why would it matter when the bath takes place, so long as it is before sunrise? It wouldn't. Okay. Verse 28, very literal again. Carcass and torn, not he devour, to unclean her. And again, her, this is the feminine of it. In her, again, the feminine of it, I, Yahweh, gives his name. So we have net vela, that's carcass, that's a corpse. So it's real common for us in English to call a dead animal a carcass, but That's also what we used to say of humans. Now we don't really talk that. It seems kind of abrupt or maybe even rude, and so we don't say it that way anymore. But back in the 1850s, when this dictionary I'm using was written, they were still doing that. Okay, so it's a dead body, whether it's of a human or an animal, that has not been laid out here. Then it says u te refa, so a carcass, and this is and torn. We would not say it that way in English. We would say a torn carcass and would use the word and, but in Hebrew you do, biblical Hebrew. Then it says lo, and this is the word for not. This is the negative article. Not yochal. Well, that's eat. You will not eat a torn carcass, right? And so since we know that we don't eat dead humans, we know that this carcass is of an animal. You don't eat a torn animal, a dead animal at that. Then it says, oh yeah, this is a really short one, isn't it? Le tama. I must not have got this thing big enough. I'm having trouble seeing some of these words. To unclean her, so it is unclean. To become unclean, it is, this is a torn, dead carcass, so it's unclean. So it doesn't matter that it's a sheep that's been torn up by wolves. You cannot pick that up off the ground and munch on it, And it says ba, which is in her or in it. Then it says ani Yahweh, I am God. That's kind of like saying, I'm the boss. This is my rule. Live by it. So he will not eat something dead or torn by animals, if you will. It is impure. I am Yahweh. I mean, that's just like, thus saith me. I swear by me. I don't know. I'm looking for some way to kind of drive this idea. I am the ultimate authority. I make the decisions. You live by them. Onkelos would not have liked that. He did not like the idea of God having the right to tell anybody what to do. But hey, God has that right. He created everything that is seen and unseen. He created us. And he gets to make the rules. Everything around us is his. He made it. It's his. And he hadn't sold it to any of us. He did give Israel to his people, but beyond that, show me any evidence where God did anything like that with anyone else. It's not there. Okay, I have enough time. So let's go on to verse 9, very literally. And keep they charge me, and not he bear they upon him sin, and die they in it, for he profane they, Yahweh, from holy them. Which kind of sounds like God saying he gets his holiness from people. Remember, we think of things backwards in English. Hebrew is actually in the right order, so it's not God getting it from us, it's us getting it from God. Anyway, we have Veshamru, that's from Shamar, which is to keep, to watch, to guard, in a narrow sense of a garden. So what are we talking about? Of a man keeping a garden. You have to prepare the ground, then you have to get all the rocks out of the way. You got to plow that ground. You got to turn it under. I don't know a lot about that anymore. I haven't done that since I was a kid. And I don't remember a lot about what we did. And as a kid, I probably didn't do a lot of, I'm sure my parents and other people did things that I didn't even know had to be done. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know a lot. But there's all this prep work. One of my jobs as a kid was to go through the field picking up the rocks. And even then, when they turned the ground over, I had a lot more rocks to pick up. We had a rock issue where I grew up. But that was one of my jobs as a kid was, get all them rocks. You had to do it by hand. So there's a lot of prep work that goes there. And then once you got your little rows, you got to put your seeds down in all of those rows. And then you got to water, make sure the water travels down all them little indentions between the rows, so everything gets watered right. And then as it comes up, you got all these weeds that come up. You're down there on your hands and knees, in my case, pulling weeds out, because if you didn't do that, it could choke out your crop, and then you're not going to have a lot of crop to eat. Boy, I was interested in that crop coming up and us having that fresh corn and fresh green beans and whatever. I was all for keeping them weeds pulled. But you think about that in human terms, where God is concerned, God is cultivating us like a field. He's prepping us and getting us ready, and then he plants the seed. And as that seed is coming up, the weeds come in to try to destroy what God has planted. But God's like a good farmer. He's in there pulling away all of the bad so that the goodness can come and grow and flourish and be fruitful. Right? That's keep. When the Bible talks about keeping his commandments, that's the way we keep the commandments. We make sure that we learn those commandments. That's the preparation of the field, if you will. And then as we learn more about those commandments, because see, the commandments are set up such that we start off with a little bit of the knowledge. You don't learn everything there is to know about a commandment the first time you hear it. It's why you hear it over and over again, because as you learn the commandment over time, you're adding more to your knowledge of that commandment. That's the pulling of the weeds, so that the law of God can grow in us properly and make us to flourish and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully you're picking up what I'm putting down. Then it says et, which is just a pointer, and it's pointing to what? Mish marti. Shamar. It's the same word. So we have ve-sham-ru, which the root word is shamar, et mish marti, and the same root, shamar. So, or am I doing the wrong word here? I see shamar there, but that could be, no, yeah, it's the same word. So then it says velo yiseu. So, and not he will bear they. So we're saying you're going to keep this charge. Maybe I can say it that way. It's because he's not saying keep the commandments. He's saying keep, perhaps we could say it, keep and guard. Keep, guard, watch, make it to grow. And what are we doing here? We're making the law of God to grow. And so it's essentially being said twice. And then it says, so that you do not bear up. And bear up what? That may help me to explain this. Allah, to bear up upon yourself, hate, sin. So we're using this word keep twice. You could say keep charge, which I probably did in my translation. That's generally the way you're going to look at it. But this is keep, you will keep. You know what I'm saying? It's making it more important. It's making you understand that the importance of following all of this stuff. God has just laid out all of these other things about the people who can eat this food, when they can eat it, when they cannot eat it. And you've got to really, really pay attention to this so that you don't lay upon yourself sin. Oh, and I was going to say that about Ben Sakai. The way he describes sin is the best way I have ever read of all the stuff I've read, all of particularly the Second Temple documentation. I've read tons of that stuff, and I read it in Latin, in Greek, in Hebrew, in Aramaic. I don't waste my time reading English translations. I stopped doing that a long time ago because what they say in English is almost never what's being said in its original language. But this Ben Zakkai said that everyone who commits sin is also in violation of the Torah. Because, and that's not the end of it, that's just the comma. That's, you're halfway through the sentence. He goes on and says, because sin is Torah rebellion. So if the law says don't do this and you do it, you have committed sin. If the law says do this and you don't, you have committed sin. And so God is telling the priest here, really be careful about this. Don't slap a mosquito on your arm and go eat with the guys, eat dinner with the guys. No, you go and wash yourself. You wait till the next morning, and then you eat your breakfast. It's very important, God is saying. This is very, very important. This is umatu. And so he's saying that you don't bear up sin. You don't have this weight of sin sitting on your shoulder. Because now you've got this heavy weight of sin and you're trying to move forward in life, and it's like having some big lead weight sitting on your shoulder is basically what's being said here. Then it says umetu, that's from moot, so that you don't die. Be'o, you don't die in it. Don't die with the weight of sin on your shoulders. Then he goes on, ki yaha lehu, and that's to profane. You're either making yourself profane. You can't make God profane, that's for sure. So it's almost got to be you that becomes profane. Then it says aniyave. So let's that's followed by another word. Oh, me kadasham. So you hear kadosh here, right? Oh, good. Here's my pure, clean, holy, all that. So here's our translation. And they will keep my charge. And they will not, so that they will not bear up sin and die in it. Not from it, but in it. I wrote that wrong in my translation. For they, speaking of the unclean animals and the creepy things, are unclean. I am Yahweh, from whom their holiness comes. This verse actually gives us God's reason as to why we eat kosher. It is because certain animals are unclean. In other words, they have impurities in them, and we can die if we eat them. Not that we will, but that we could. All right. I'm out of time. Shalom, shalom, everyone.
The blessing, vaYiqra. Yevarecha Yahweh v'yish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'hunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.